streaming live. So as we begin the stream for this new session, we are on session number 29. And this is February 13, 2022. Welcome everyone to this session 29 of Advent and Divine Justice. And I see we've got people joining here on Zoom, and of course, those of you on Facebook and on YouTube, welcome. This Sunday, on this session number 29, we're going to begin with a prayer for the southern states, and we're going to resume our class on exploring the Advent and Divine Justice with the Crimson Academy materials, which we also recommend that you take a look at the YouTube channel for the Crimson Academy. Now, Mr. Ehsan Bayat, would you be able to, this session, say the prayer?
Absolutely. Thank you. O my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest. Abdul Baha. Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Jeremiah, and welcome back. So, dear friends, we were in our last session studying paragraph 63 through 73 of the Advent of Divine Justice. If you're like Ehsan, where is paragraph 63 in my Advent of Divine Justice, and where does it start? So if you have this Advent of Divine Justice, paragraph 63, they actually have paragraphs in them, so you shouldn't be easy to find them. So paragraph 63 starts, "Dearly beloved friends." It starts on page 65. Okay, it says, "Dearly beloved friends, I have attempted in the beginning of these pages." Interestingly, there's 124 paragraphs in Advent of Divine Justice. So as mentioned in our last paragraph, our last session, paragraph 63, so if you times that by 2, comes to 126. So roughly, this is the halfway point in the Advent of Divine Justice. So here the beloved guardian is transitioning. He's already covered the first half of Advent of Divine Justice about the spiritual prerequisites for success, these rectitude of conduct, the chaste and holy life, and the freedom from all from prejudices, really, from racial prejudice. Okay, so this is paragraph 63. We find it on page 65 in this one. If you have this one, so here's another one. This is actually the 1990 edition. This is found on page 43, okay? And no excuses, dear friends. If you have this one, an even older edition, the Dearly Beloved Friend starts on page 36, okay? So there we are. This is the Advent of Divine Justice that we're going to be picking up, okay? So let's get back into it. Okay, here we go. Now, we're finishing up our study of paragraph 63 through 73. And in those paragraphs, the beloved guardian was talking about this force, this God-born force that is emanated from the coming of twin manifestations, the Blessed Bab and Baha'u'llah. And I'm pulling this extract. This is from the World Order of Baha'u'llah. Okay, so the beloved guardian in the World Order of Baha'u'llah describes the impact of this creative force, this God-born force in creating and developing the Baha'i institutions. This is the words of the beloved guardian. He says, the onrushing forces so miraculously released through the agency of two independent and swiftly successive manifestations are now under our very eyes. And through the care of the chosen stewards of a far-flung faith being gradually mustered and disciplined, they are slowly crystallizing into institutions that will come to be regarded as the hallmark and glory of the age we are called upon to establish by our deeds, immortalize. So this is one of the major themes in these paragraphs 63 through 73 about this God-born force. And so that's why I pulled this extract coming from the World Order of Baha'u'llah. So in paragraph 71 through 73, this is the main key points. The beloved guardian here is describing the impact of the force released through the revelations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and what should be the reaction of the American believers in its initial stage. The force is upsetting the equilibrium of a world that is dimmed by the steadily dying out of the religion, afflicted with the explosive forces of a blind and triumphant nationalism, scorched with false theories and doctrines that threaten to replace the worship of God, weakened by a rampant and brutal materialism, disintegrating through the corrosive influence of moral and spiritual decadence, and entangled in the coils of economic anarchy and strife. So this is the forces, these forces that are strangling and scorching and weakening the American believers. These are the forces that are hampering the onward march of the cause. So these are the forces, and they're upsetting the equilibrium of the world. So this is as mentioned, dimmed by the steadily dying out of the light of religion. We see this all over the world. Afflicted with the explosive forces of a blind and triumphant nationalism. We see this not only in our country, United States of America, we see this again all over the world. We see wars on the horizon and scorched with false theories and doctrines that threaten to replace the worship of God, weakened by rampant and brutal materialism. I mean, really, when the beloved guardian earlier on in the advent of divine justice called the United States of America, we are drowning in a sea of materialism, he was not mincing words. He chose his words very carefully, and he was actually quoting Abdul-Baha even, because Abdul-Baha in Tablets of Divine Plan called the United States sea of materialism. So this is one of the afflictions that is on the United States of America, on the North American Bahá'ís, that we are being weakened by rampant and brutal materialism. Brutal. This is the words of the beloved guardian. Imagine that. Brutal. Disintegrating through the corrosive influence of moral and spiritual decadence. Corrosive influence. Now, how is the corrosion happening? When you think of corrosive forces, corrosion happens from within, right? Just like an apple, when it goes bad, it corrodes from within. It goes bad from within and rots from within. That's why all of these spiritual prerequisites for the success of all the teaching plans, of all the temple projects and fund, is for what? The transformation of the inner life. to prevent the corrosive forces, the moral and spiritual decadence to come in. A wonderful anecdote was this story about a boat will always stay afloat, no matter how tempestuous the winds are, how tempestuous the waters and waves are. It doesn't matter. The boat will always stay afloat as long as the water doesn't come in. But once the water comes in, then the boat will lose its balance. It will then start having problems. If the hull is attacked or broken and the water enters the ship, then the ship will sink. So this is the reality. We have to be on guard. We have to protect our heart. We have to be strong. We have to have the armor of the love of God and protect ourselves from the corrosive influence of this moral and spiritual decadence. And again, here the beloved guardian in the Advent of Divine Justice says, entangled in the coils of economic anarchy and strife. So this is a wonderful quote that I found very apt. This is from the book of Timothy. It says, in the last days, this is the days of Baha'u'llah, in the last days, there will be very difficult times. People will love only themselves and money. They will be boastful and proud. They will scoff at God. They will be disobedient to their parents. They will be ungrateful. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends. They will be reckless and puffed up with pride. They will love pleasure rather than God. What an incredible insightfulness of prophecy of coming from Timothy. And this is a prophecy of in the last days. Now, in paragraph 73 of the Advent of Divine Justice, let me pull it here and we can reread it because it's such an incredible paragraph. This is a paragraph 73. Now, the beloved guardian is talking about the opportunities, all these catastrophes, these that are afflicting the world. As mentioned, we talked about, dimmed by the steadily dying out of religion, afflictive, explosive forces, all these dark forces, materialism, corrosion of moral and spiritual decadence, all the terrible things. But beloved guardian is saying, all of these, are creating opportunities. So here in paragraph 73, because what is happening? The light of religion, the darkness is spreading. So what should be happening? The Bahá'ís should be strengthening that light. So we become that beacon so that the whole world will see that the answer is the Bahá'ís. The answer is Baha'u'llah, because the Bahá'ís have the answer. We have the panacea for an ailing world. So in paragraph 73, this is what the beloved guardian says. The opportunities which the turmoil of the present age presents, with all the sorrows which it evokes, the fears which it excites, the disillusionment which it produces, the perplexities which it creates, the indignation which it arouses, the revolt which it provokes, the grievances it engenders, the spirit of restless search which it awakens, must in like manner be exploited for the purpose of spreading far and wide the knowledge of the redemptive power of the faith of Baha'u'llah, and for enlisting fresh recruits in the ever-swelling army of his followers. So precious an opportunity, so rare a conjunction of favorable circumstances may never again recur. Now is the time, the beloved guardian states, now is the time. The appointed time for the American believers, the vanguard of the hosts of the most great name, to proclaim through the agencies and channels of a specially designed administrative order their capacity and readiness to rescue a fallen and sore-tried generation that has rebelled against its God and ignored his warnings, and to offer it that complete security which only the strongholds of their faith can provide. Interesting, isn't it? Now is the time. And here the beloved guardian is saying they have rebelled against God, right? This is paragraph 73. He says, what does he says? Their readiness to rescue a fallen and sore-tried generation that has rebelled against this God. And we quoted Timothy, right? He says they will scoff at God. They will be disobedient, right? This is the last days. What? It could not be more apt. Is, this time, the beloved guardian says they have rebelled against God and ignored his warnings. So I found that so, interesting that this is the time that we are living in. So now is the time, the beloved guardian, and this time will not recur. And I was thinking a bit about it. When His Holiness Abdul Baha was traveling, 1911, 1912, time of the beloved guardian, during that period from 1921 all the way to 1957, all those times were during periods of war. 1911, was on the cusp of wars, coming up on world wars. And what was the message of His Holiness Abdul Baha? It was constant peace. He was constantly giving talks on peace. And so there is our perfect exemplar. What was he talking about? So as Baha'is, we should, in our, not only our social life, in our private life, in our any events, this should be our normal speak, to talk on the Baha'i solution to the ails of the world, talk about peace, the coming together of humanity. So to reiterate, as the believers of Baha'u'llah are aware of the prophecies and promises of Baha'u'llah, such conditions as mentioned will only deepen their faith and certitude. This is the time that the American believers should proclaim the faith through the channels of the administrative order and to increase their capacity and readiness to rescue a generation that has rebelled against its God and ignored his warnings. So there we are. Those were paragraphs 63 through 73. Any questions at this time before we transition to our next part covering paragraphs 74 through 80? I know it was just a few slides, but do you have any questions at this time? Okay, excellent. Let's transition to our next part. Here we go.
Thank you for explaining the importance of these forces, the revolutionizing force versus the forces that are opposed to the revolutionizing force, the one that is being transformed.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, John. Yes, there's revolutionizing forces. These are one of the forces that is mentioned copiously in the writings. Another force is the dark forces. It's literally like the light and the dark that are opposing each other. And the dark forces, in fact, there's a compilation actually has been created on the forces, and even a wonderful book has been written on this subject by Mr. Hooper Dunbar. And so these forces that are at play in the world, and that we have a role to be a force ourselves. We have to be a bastion of light. We have to be a force ourselves for the spiritualization of humanity, to be a force of transformation of hearts. This is what is required of us. First, through the transformation of our inner life and private character. And through this will affect a change in our life of our family. And through that, the life of our community. And through that, our community is transformed. And through that, it will be affecting a change in the greater society. So this is the transformation that is required of the Baha'i community. This is what it states in paragraph 28, again in paragraph 48, and again in paragraph 150. And all through the writings of Baha'u'llah, His Holiness Abdul Baha, the beloved guardian, talking about this new race of man. New race of man means a transformation complete, his inner life and external conditions. This is what the Advent of Divine Justice is about, a complete transformation. It means to be a Baha'i, whole Baha'i, not just, okay, on a Sunday, he's a Baha'i. Yeah, he's showing up to feast or he's showing up to this or that. A Baha'i in complete inner life, external conditions. And it's, the quote from Baha'u'llah says, when a Baha'i enters into the city, the dust rises up and, shouts and proclaims, saying, how joyous I am that this soul has entered into my city. This is because even the dust would be excited that a true Baha'i has entered. This is the transformation of heart, that to affect a transformation in all around you. Now, this is the next part that we're getting into, paragraph 74 through 80. Now, the beloved guardian wanted to is now addressing it practically, teaching. How do we do it? What does it take to teach the cause? How do we prepare to teach the cause? What are the steps? So now, remember, this was written in 1938. The first 7-year plan was launched in 1937. And so the beloved guardian is now outlining how to teach, and especially to how to pioneer. What are the steps to pioneer? So this is all from the beloved guardian, paragraph 74 through 80. So we're going to read the paragraphs, then we're going to study it as always. Okay, so I'm going to read the first paragraph, then I'll hand it off to our next readers. Here we go. Paragraph 74. The teaching campaign inaugurated throughout the states of the North American Republic and the Dominion of Canada acquires therefore an importance and is invested with an urgency that cannot be overestimated. Launched on its course through the creative energies released by the will of Abdul Baha and sweeping across the Western Hemisphere through the propelling force which it is generating, it must, I feel, be carried out in conformity with certain principles designed to ensure its efficient conduct and to hasten the attainment of its objective. All right, our next reader. Dear Scott, could you read paragraph 75, please?
Mute first. Those who participate in such a campaign, whether in an organizing capacity or as workers to whose care the execution of the task itself has been committed, must, as an essential preliminary to the discharge of their duties, thoroughly familiarize themselves with the various aspects of the history and teachings of their faith. In their efforts to achieve this purpose, they must study for themselves conscientiously and painstakingly the literature of their faith, delve into its teachings, assimilate its laws and principles, ponder its admonitions, tenets, and purposes, commit to memory certain of its exhortations and prayers, master the essentials of its administration, and keep abreast of its current affairs and latest developments. They must strive to obtain from sources that are authoritative and unbiased, a sound knowledge of the history and tenets of Islam, the source and background of their faith, and approach reverently and with a mind purged from preconceived ideas, the study of the Quran, which, apart from the sacred scriptures of the Bahá'í and Bahá'í dispensations, constitutes the only book which can be regarded as an absolutely authenticated repository of the Word of God. They must devote the special attention to the investigation of those institutions and circumstances that are directly connected with the origin and birth of their faith, and the station claimed by its forerunner, and with the laws revealed by its author.
Excellently read, Scott. Thank you so much. Okay, and paragraph 76. Dear Jeremiah, could you read this one for us?
Yeah, I'll try. Having acquired in their essentials these prerequisites of success in the teaching field, they must, whenever they contemplate undertaking any specific mission in the countries of Latin America, endeavor, whenever feasible, to acquire a certain proficiency in the languages spoken by the inhabitants of those countries, and a knowledge of their customs, habits, and outlooks. The teachers going to those parts, Abdu'l-Baha, referring in one of the tablets of the Divine Plan to the Central American republics, has written, must also be familiar with the Spanish language. A party speaking their languages, he in another tablet has written, must turn their faces to and travel through the three great island groups of the Pacific Ocean. The teachers traveling in different directions. He further states, must know the language of the country in which they will enter. For example, a person being proficient in the Japanese language may travel to Japan, or a person knowing the Chinese language may hasten to China, and so forth.
Thank you, dear Jeremiah. Thank you. Okay, and moving on. Okay, Edgar, could you read this paragraph?
No participator in this inter-American campaign of teaching must feel that the initiative for any particular activity connected with this work must rest solely with those agencies, whether assemblies or committees whose special concern is to promote and facilitate the attainment of this vital objective of the 7-year plan. It is the bonded duty of every American believer as the faithful trustee of Abdu'l-Baha's divine plan to initiate, promote, and consolidate within the limits fixed by the administrative principles of the faith any activity he or she deems fit to undertake for the furtherance of the plan, whether neither the threatening world situated nor any consideration of lack of material sources, of mental equipment, of knowledge or experience, desirable as they are, should deter any prospective pioneer teacher from arising independently and from setting in motion the forces which Abdu'l-Baha has repeatedly assured us will once release attraction even as a magnet, the promised and infallible aid of Baha'u'llah. Let him not wait for any directions or expect any special encouragement from the elected representatives of his community, nor be deterred by any obstacle which his relatives or fellow citizens may be inclined to place in his path, nor mind the censure of the critics or enemies.
Very well read. Thank you, Edgar. Excellent. And I'll read this closing part. Thank you, Edgar. Be unrestrained as the wind is Baha'u'llah's counsel to every would-be teacher of his cause, while carrying the message of him who hath caused the dawn of divine guidance to break. Consider how the wind, faithful to that which God hath ordained, bloweth upon all regions of the earth, be they inhabited or desolate. Neither the sight of desolation nor the evidences of prosperity can either pain or please it. It bloweth in every direction, as bidden by its creator. And when he determineth to leave his home for the sake of the cause of his Lord, Baha'u'llah in another passage, referring to such a teacher, has revealed, let him put his whole trust in God as the best provision for his journey, and array himself with the robe of virtue, if he be kindled with the fire of his love, if he forgoeth all created things, the words he uttereth shall set on fire them that hear him. And paragraph 78. Dear John, could you, or Scott, I saw Scott's hand. Go for it, Scott.
Having on his own initiative and undaunted by any hindrances with which either friend or foe may, unwillingly or deliberately, obstruct his path, resolved to arise and respond to the call of teaching, let him carefully consider every avenue of approach which he might utilize in his personal attempts to capture the attention, maintain the interest, and deepen the faith of those whom he seeks to bring into the fold of his faith. Let him survey the possibilities which the particular circumstances in which he lives offers him, evaluate their advantages, and proceed intelligently and systematically to utilize them for the achievement of the object he has in mind. Let him also attempt to devise such methods as association with clubs, exhibitions, and societies, lectures on subjects akin to the teachings and ideals of his cause, such as temperance, morality, social welfare, religious and racial tolerance, economic cooperation, Islam, and a comparative religion, or participation in social, cultural, humanitarian, charitable, and educational organizations and enterprises which, while safeguarding the integrity of his faith, will open up to him a multitude of ways and means whereby he can enlist successively the sympathy, the support, and ultimately the allegiance of those with whom he comes in contact.
Very well read. Thank you. And carrying on, Scott, this is the end of the paragraph. It was a long one. Go for it.
Let him, while such contacts are being made, bear in mind the claims which his faith is constantly making upon him to preserve its dignity and station, to safeguard the integrity of its laws and principles, to demonstrate its comprehensiveness and universality, and to defend fearlessly its manifold and vital interests. Let him consider the degree of his hearers' receptivity and decide for himself the suitability of either the direct or indirect method of teaching, whereby he can impress upon the seeker the vital importance of the divine message and persuade him to throw in his lot with those who have already embraced it. Let him remember the example set by Abdu'l-Baha and his constant admonition to shower such kindness upon the seeker and exemplify to such a degree the spirit of the teachings he hopes to instill into him that the recipient will be spontaneously impelled to identify himself with the cause embodying such teachings. Let him refrain at the outset from insisting on such laws and observances as might impose too severe a strain on the seeker's newly awakened faith, and endeavor to nurse him patiently, tactfully, and yet determinedly into full maturity, and aid him to proclaim his unqualified acceptance of whatever has been ordained by Baha'u'llah.
There we are, paragraph 78. And still yet a little bit more.
Let him, as soon as that stage has been attained, introduce him to the body of his fellow believers and seek, through constant fellowship and active participation in the local activities of his community, to enable him to contribute his share to the enrichment of its life, the furtherance of its tasks, the consolidations of its interests, and the coordination of its activities with those of its sister communities. Let him not be content until he has infused into his spiritual child so deep a longing as to impel him to arise independently in his turn and devote his energies to the quickening of such souls and the upholding of its laws and principles laid down by his newly adopted faith.
There we are, paragraph 78. I think that was it on paragraph 78. Now we move to 79. I'll read this one. Let every participator in the continent-wide campaign initiated by the American believers, and particularly those engaged in pioneer work in virgin territories, bear in mind the necessity of keeping in close and constant touch with those responsible agencies designed to direct, coordinate, and facilitate the teaching activities of the entire community, whether it be the body of their elected national representatives or its chief auxiliary institution, the National Teaching Committee or its subsidiary organs, the regional teaching committees or the local spiritual assemblies and their respective teaching committees. They who labor for the spread of the cause of Baha'u'llah should, through constant interchange of ideas, through letters, circulars, reports, bulletins, and other means of communication with these established instruments designed for the propagation of the faith, ensure the smooth and speedy functioning of the teaching machinery of their administrative order. Confusion, delay, duplication of efforts, dissipation of energy will thereby be completely avoided, and the mighty flood of the grace of Baha'u'llah flowing abundantly and without the least obstruction through these essential channels will so inundate the hearts and souls of men as to enable them to bring forth the harvest repeatedly predicted by Abdul Baha. And our last paragraph. Okay. Miss Simone, could you read this one for us?
Sure. If I can see. Upon every participator in this concerted effort, unprecedented in the annals of the American Baha'i community, rests the spiritual obligation to make the mandate of teaching so vitally binding upon all, the all-pervading concern of his life. In his daily activities and contacts, in all his journeys, whether for business or otherwise, on his holidays and outings, and on any mission he may be called upon to undertake, every bearer of the message of Baha'u'llah should consider it not only an obligation, but a privilege to scatter far and wide the seeds of his faith, and to rest content in the abiding knowledge that whatever be the immediate response to that message, and however inadequate the vehicle that conveyed it, the power of its author will, as he sees fit, enable those seeds to germinate, and in circumstances which no one can foresee, enrich that harvest with the labor of his followers will gather. If he be member of any spiritual assembly, let him encourage his assembly to consecrate a certain part of its time, at each of its sessions, to the earnest and prayerful consideration of such ways and means as may foster campaign of teaching or may furnish whatever resources are available for its progress, extension, and consolidation.
Beautifully read. Thank you. And lastly, Ms. Simon, the concluding part of paragraph 80, if you could read this part too.
If he attends his summer school, and everyone without exception is urged to take advantage of attending it, let him consider such an occasion as a welcome and precious opportunity to enrich, though through lectures, study, and discussion, his knowledge of the fundamentals of his faith, as to be able to transmit with greater confidence and effectiveness the message that has been entrusted to his care. Let him moreover seek, whenever feasible, through intercommunity visits to stimulate the zeal for teaching and to demonstrate to outsiders the zest and alertness of the promoters of his cause and the organic unity of its institutions.
Wonderfully read. Thank you so much. To all of our readers, thank you. So there we are, paragraphs 74 through 80. Wow. So much in these paragraphs. So I'm going to just recap and then we're going to go through our intensive study. Here we go. Paragraph 74. Now the beloved guardian is talking about the teaching campaign. What a teaching campaign is this? It's the first 7-year plan, right? So the teaching campaign has been inaugurated through the states of the North American Republic and the Dominion of Canada, and acquires therefore an importance and is invested with urgency. The beloved guardian is saying it's invested with urgency. The hour is now, the time is now, the beloved guardian is saying urgency that cannot be overestimated. Launched on its course through the creative energies released by the will of Abdu'l-Bahá and sweeping across the Western Hemisphere. What will is this of the Abdu'l-Bahá? Not only this is the tablets of the divine plan. So this is the will of Abdu'l-Bahá. He's called upon them, right, to go and do this. It must be carried out in conformity with certain principles designed to ensure its efficient conduct and to hasten the attainment of its objective. So now the beloved guardian, as opposed to the time of Abdu'l-Bahá, wants systematic teaching, as opposed to individuals such as Martha Root, who, God bless her, she was stellar, but he is calling for a systematic form of teaching in the sense of these teachers that are going out pioneering to be more systematic. What are the requirements for it? What is the method? So the paragraph 75, this is an incredible paragraph. Now, the beloved guardian is outlining what is required of the teacher. Those who participate in such a campaign, whether in organizing capacity or as workers, to those who care for the execution of the task, must be committed, as an essential preliminary to the discharge of their duties. Now, so there's even a prerequisite for teaching? Wait. Hold on. Now, we've talked about spiritual prerequisites for the success of all teaching plans. We talked about rectitude of conduct. We talked about a chaste and holy life. And we talked about freedom from all prejudices. Now, there's even prerequisites for teaching. Here, paragraph 75. He says, essential preliminary to the discharge of their duties. So this is preliminary. You got to have these before you teach. So what is the beloved guardian saying? So he's saying thoroughly familiarize themselves with the various aspects of the history and teachings of their faith. In their efforts to achieve this purpose, they must study for themselves conscientiously, painstakingly. So it's interesting. The beloved Guardian used the word painstakingly. It's not easy. So you got to put effort in, right? The literature of their faith, delve into its teachings. It's not like, I just read a little bit, I kind of got a general understanding of the faith. No. The beloved Guardians say painstakingly, delve into its teachings, assimilate its laws and principles, ponder its admonitions, its tenets and purposes, commit to memory certain of its exhortations and prayers, master the essentials of its administration. And then it's not just like, oh yeah, I know its laws, its teachings and everything, but you don't know what's going on right now with the House of Justice has sent messages and everything. So you know everything, all the way up to say 2015, but now you don't know really what's going on with the current messages of the Universal House of Justice. What is the beloved Guardian saying? He says, keep abreast of its current affairs and latest developments. So you should be reading the latest messages of the Supreme Body, Universal House of Justice. That is your call to action. You should be keeping abreast of these current developments. And then they must strive to obtain from sources that are authoritative and unbiased a sound knowledge of the history and tenets of Islam. So, oh my goodness, it's not just per se, I know about the faith, I know about its teachings, I know about its tenets, I know about its history, and I know about its purposes, and I memorize the exhortations and all of these, and I know all the arguments and everything. It's not just per se what has come out of the central figures' mouths. It's also, you got to know about Islam. Now we have to know about Islam. What? Yes, you have to know Islam. Why? The beloved Guardian explains. He says, a sound knowledge of the history and tenets of Islam, the source and background of your faith. So it's the foundation. You got to have a source under a solid understanding. But the words the beloved Guardian here uses very importantly, authoritative and unbiased. So you have to not just, just have it, those are what you have to seek out. And approach reverently with a mind purged from preconceived ideas, the study of the Quran, which apart from the sacred scriptures of the Bahá'í and Bahá'í revelations, constitutes the only book which can be regarded as an absolute authenticated repository of the Word of God. So you got to study the Quran. Now, if you want to embark on a study of the writings of Baha'u'llah, the Blessed, His Holiness the Bab, you got to study the writings of Islam because, for example, Kitab-i-Iran, there are so many references to the Quran in Kitab-i-Iran, so many references all throughout the writings to the Quran. You got to have a well understanding of the Quran to be able to understand this faith so much more. So it's a requirement. They must devote special attention to the investigation of those institutions and circumstances that are directly connected with the origin and birth of their faith, with the station claimed by its forerunner, and with the laws revealed by its author. Okay? So now, this is another incredible paragraph 76. So it's saying, having acquired these essentials. Now the beloved Guardian is saying, okay, you have now achieved rectitude of conduct. You have achieved, a chaste and holy life. You have achieved freedom from racial prejudices. And you have also done all these things in paragraph 75. You've worked, you've reached this level of mastery, and now you've reached all of these qualities and everything. Now he says, having acquired these essentials, these prerequisites of success in the teaching field, now you can now enter into as a pioneer. But the beloved Guardian is saying what you have to do here. It's very interesting. He's saying to acquire he says, if you enter into a country, right? Going to a country, let me read this. Whenever they contemplate undertaking any specific mission in the countries of Latin America, because that was one of the goals of this first 7-year plan, to go to the countries of Latin America. Endeavor, whenever possible, feasible, to acquire a certain proficiency in the languages spoken by the inhabitants of those countries, and a knowledge of their customs, habits, and outlook. So it's not like just go there and start teaching in the language that you already know. You're not an invader. You're not coming, oh, I'm an Englishman and I'm going there. I'm a proud Englishman and and we drink tea and I love English tea and I'm going into this country and I will impose my tea drinking behaviors on these people and I will speak English, you know? No, you know, the beloved guardian is saying, you learn the culture, you learn the language, and you learn the customs before you enter into that country. And here, this is a quote from Abdul Baha, says, the teacher is going to those parts. Abdul Baha, referring in one of the tablets of the Divine Plan to the Central American republics, has written, must also be familiar with the Spanish language. So if you're going into the Latin America, I mean, except for, I believe, Brazil, they all speak Spanish. Only Brazil speaks Portuguese. So really, you got to learn Spanish. So here, he in another tablet has written, must turn their faces and travel throughout the 3 great island groups of the Pacific Ocean. So the teacher is traveling in different directions, he further states, must know the language of the country in which they will enter. So if the beloved guardian is stressing, quoting from Abdul Baha and Tablets Divine Plan, if you are going pioneering, you learn the language before you enter into that country. This is from Abdul Baha, beloved guardian. He says, for example, a person being proficient in the Japanese language may travel to Japan, or a person knowing the Chinese language may hasten to China, and so forth. So if you're planning to pioneer, to go forth, learn the language before you go forth. Okay, so now paragraph 77. Any questions on those so far or thoughts? No, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, he's outlining it very systematically. Now, paragraph 77. No participator in this inter-American campaign, because this is what it is. This is an incredible campaign. It's now focusing on North as well as South, as well as Central America's inter-American campaign of teaching must feel that the initiative for any particular activity connected with this work must rest solely with those agencies, whether assemblies or committees. So the work is not solely on the assemblies or committees. The work is, a special concern is to promote and facilitate the attainment of this vital objective of the 7-year plan. This is such an important line. It is the bounden duty. It means you can't, inescapable. It is, you are, as a Baha'i, it is now on top of your back, like a duty. It's your obligation. It's your duty, born into this world. It is your bounden duty of every American believer as the faithful trustee of Abdul Baha's divine plan. That's what we are as American Baha'is. We are faithful trustees of Abdul Baha's divine plan. Now, to do what? Initiate, promote, and consolidate within the limits fixed by the administrative principles of the faith any activity he or she deems fit to undertake for the furtherance of the plan. So we should initiate our own teaching plans. This is what the beloved guardian is saying. We shouldn't wait for the institutions. We shouldn't wait for the area teaching committees or this or that or the local spiritual assemblies. Every single one of us as an American Baha'i should initiate, promote, and consolidate, but also work in unison, and work as one. But we all should have our own teaching plans too. This is the beloved guardian. Then the words of the beloved guardian, neither the threatening world situation, nor any consideration of lack of material resources, of mental equipment, of knowledge, or of experience, desirable as they are, should deter any prospective pioneer teacher from arising independently and from setting in motion the forces which Abdul Baha has repeatedly assured us will, once released, attract even as a magnet the promised and infallible aid of Baha'u'llah. And how many times have I shown you quotes? The moment you open your mouth, It is after suddenly you're turning on the electromagnet, and the forces of his aid suddenly, like all these pieces of iron are suddenly rushed towards you. And those of the concourse on high are just ready to come to your aid. Every one of them up there, from Marion Jack to Lua Getzinger to Martha Root, you name it, they're ready. They're just ready. And you just have to open your mouth, and the forces will suddenly come to your aid. And then the beloved guardian says, let him not wait. Let him not wait for any directions or expect any special encouragement. Oh, I love this part because it always reminds me of that wonderful YouTube clip of Mr. Kaiser Barnes, where he was talking about the different types of Baha'is. And you can always look it up on YouTube. It's humorous, but it's very true. And he talks about the different kinds of Baha'is. And he says there's one kind of Baha'i that is like a cat. You have to see the whole clip. This is Esson paraphrasing and me talking about it, but I encourage you to look it up. It's the types of Baha'is, Mr. Kaiser Barnes, former Universalist Justice. And what he said was there's a type of Baha'i that's like a cat, and they love to be petted. And, as in Persian, it says naz, naz. And they always love to be, encouraged, like this. And so that's one type of Baha'i. And here is the beloved guardian. It says, let him not wait for any directions or expect any special encouragement. And at the end of that wonderful, wonderful clip from Mr. Kaiser Barnes, he says the type of Baha'i that we should be. He says we should be like the stars, constant in the sky, shining bright, dependent on no one. Constant. Not the type that is, constant being, needing this encouragement, like that, And if you stop the encouragement, they just, I'm dead, I'm useless. I can't do anything, And that's often the case of some Baha'is, that they have to have that constant reinforcement, or else they do not do anything. And so this says, let him not wait for the constant reinforcement, this constant special encouragement from the elected representatives or his community, nor be deterred by any obstacles which his relatives or fellow citizens may incline to place in his path, nor mind the censure of his critics or enemies. Fearless, immovable as a mountain should be his qualities. Go out and do it. The call has been made. What are you doing? That is the call by Abdul-Baha. But by the beloved guardian. And then this incredible call and summon by Baha'u'llah, be unrestrained as the wind, is Baha'u'llah's counsel to every would-be teacher. The words would-be teacher, right? Are you a would-be teacher? Are you going to pick up the call of Baha'u'llah? Are you a would-be teacher of his cause? While carrying the message of him who have caused the dawn of divine guidance to break. Then he describes what it means to be unrestrained as the wind. He says, consider how the wind, faithful to that which God hath ordained, bloweth upon all regions of the earth, be they inhabited or desolate. Neither the sight of desolation nor the evidences of prosperity can either pain or please it. It bloweth in every direction as bidden by its creator. And when he determineth to leave his home for the sake of the cause of his Lord, Baha'u'llah, in another passage referring to such a teacher, as revealed, this is what we have to do. He says, let him put his whole trust in God. Do we do that? Or this is what we say. You got to put your whole trust in God as the best provision for his journey, and array himself with this robe of virtue. Remember, we talked about rectitude of conduct, clothed in the armor of the love of God. This is what he says. So not only put your whole trust in God, and then the best provision for his journey, arrayed himself with the robe of virtue. Then I love the concluding part here. He says, if he be kindled with the fire of his love. Are you kindled? Is your heart burning with the love of Baha'u'llah? The love of Baha'u'llah is consuming you. Reminds me of Suleiman Khan, the candles burning in his body, right? The 9 candles all over his body. But as Baha'is, we should be consumed like those candles, but with the fire of the love of God ever burning through us until every atom of our body is consumed with the love of Baha'u'llah. If he be kindled with the fire of his love, if he forgo all created things, the words he uttereth shall set on fire them that hear him. That is powerful, my dear friends. That is powerful. We move on. Paragraph 78. Now, having on his own initiative and undaunted by any hindrances and which either friend or foe may unwittingly or deliberately obstruct his path, resolve to arise and respond to the call of teaching. This is a very cool paragraph. Now, why I say this is such a cool paragraph, I want you to hear the words that are coming here. In this paragraph, the beloved guardian is now showing the approach that you need to do in teaching. Okay? Starts from here. Let him survey the possibilities which the particular circumstances in which he lives offer. This is a very scientific approach. Remember, the beloved guardian is very scientific in his mind, how he did things. First, survey it. For example, when you do the scientific method, you have to observe everything first. Then you form a hypothesis, right? And after you formed your hypothesis, you do your tests. And if everything is tested, then you can come up with a theorem, right? So the first approach is observation. And so the beloved guardian says, let him survey the possibilities which the particular circumstances in which he lives offers him. Survey everything. What is the possibilities to teach the cause? Look at your life. Where can you and what can you do to teach the cause? Survey the possibilities, right? Evaluate their advantages and proceed intelligently and systematically to utilize them for the achievement of the objective he has in mind. So survey the possibilities, evaluate their advantages, the pros and cons and everything, evaluate which was the best opportunity to promote and promulgate his word, and then proceed intelligently and systematically. Could not be a more scientific approach to endeavoring in the work of the teaching of the cause, right? Then let him also attempt to devise such methods as, so then he says, okay, now the Baha'is should think about working with like-minded organizations. Okay, these like-minded organizations are such, he says, they should be with clubs and exhibitions, societies, lectures on subjects. And he mentions them: temperance, morality, social welfare, religious, racial tolerance, economic cooperation, Islam, and comparative religion. So if you join a group on Islam, make sure you've already studied on Islam. So you enter that group and you're like, and also remember the beloved guardian says, make sure you go with authoritative and non-biased sources. So if you enter those groups, you are not entering with a very biased understanding. That's just sharing that. So, but here the beloved guardian is now sharing that if you want to have, in the words of the Universal House of Justice, that outward-looking orientation, right? You will have this type of wanting to go out and teach, and not just even teach, but create this circle of friends. So that then when you have created these veritable friendships, you can naturally, through your association with them, share with them the greatest jewel that is in your possession. So this is the beloved guardian here say, enter into all of these spaces And so that then naturally, through your association with them, the word of God, this great jewel, will be presented to them. And let him, while such contacts are being made, bear in mind the claims which his faith is constantly making upon him to preserve its dignity and station, to safeguard the integrity of its laws and principles, to demonstrate its comprehensiveness and universality, and defend fearlessly its manifold and vital interests. So what is the beloved guardian saying here? Do not pick and choose a quote, and just say that is what the faith stands for, okay? The faith preserve its dignity and station. It's like one planet, one people, please, Baha'i. You pick a quote and then you say, that's what the Baha'i faith is. Yeah, that the Baha'i faith accepts that we are, the oneness of humanity. The Baha'i faith accepts the world peace and everything. But there's a lot more to it, right? So we have to preserve its dignity, its station, and the integrity of its laws. And let him consider the degree of his hearers' receptivity. And this is such an important line here coming from the beloved guardian. Let him consider the degree of his hearers' receptivity. And I laugh every time, because I remember, God rest him, Mr. Frutan, Mr. Ali Akbar, Mr. Frutan, what he was at Ehsan. There was one time, there was a friend who was such an incredible teacher, and Mr. Frutan had the bounty of being in his presence. But every time he had the opportunity to teach, his excitement and jubilation would penetrate into him so much, he poured out the whole revelation upon that, per se, poor, unsuspecting individual. And it was literally like hitting him with a fire hose. And he says that person often became a Baha'i because he was so overwhelmed. He was like, help, and this is what Mr. Frutan said once. He said this person just had to, per se, give in, because it was just so much pouring out. And he says, the Mr. Frutan said it was in one of these pilgrim talks, he was saying that the friends have to sense the degree of the hearer's receptivity. First, we should study the example of the master. How did he teach? The beloved master first really listened to whoever he wanted to teach. And it really wasn't even about teaching. If you look at and studied the stories of Abdul Baha, such as Portals to Freedom, it really even wasn't about teaching. It was about genuine love. That's what the faith is. It's genuine love. You love someone so much, you cannot help but share them with the greatest jewel that you've come across, which is the announcement of these twin manifestations who are coming to bring a civilization that will last, 500 centuries. This is the greatest gift, talking about creating advancing civilization. Just want to share it with them and creating that love friendship with their heart. So, but you cannot burden them. So first you have to hear their heart. For example, there was someone that I really wanted to share the faith with, right? I mean, this person was such a good friend, and I wanted to share the faith with them. And I sat with them, and I discovered that they had recently, and I didn't even know this, they had recently been in an abusive relationship, right? But if I opened my mouth at that point in time and started talking about, the faith or whatever, it would have gone completely wrong. But I listened to their heart and heard their pains and sufferings, and just listened, genuinely listened, and discovered that this came out because their heart had been hurt, right? And I deemed at that point in time, even me opening my mouth on anything, even sharing a quote, or whatever was not the appropriate time. It was just to listen and help them feel and connect and love because they had been hurt. So the reality is often we don't know what's going on in people's lives. We don't know what's going on up here or even here, and we just have to be better listeners. So this is the reality. We should consider the degree of the hearer's receptivity. And also, remember, they may not even be able to have that level of capacity to handle some things we say. Hearing, that Baha'u'llah is the return of Christ. Oh my God, we also have to be wary of what words we say and choose at different times. That might be way too much for people to hear at times. So gauge the receptivity of the listener. Okay, so that was, let him remember the example set by Abdul Baha and his constant admonition to shower kindness upon the seeker. Exemplified to such a degree the spirit of his teachings, he hopes to instill in them that the recipient will spontaneously impelled to identify himself with the cause embodying such teachings. And let him refrain at the outset from insisting on such laws and observances as might impose too severe a strain on the seeker's newly awakened faith. So this is called, in my verbiage, sabotage. So if you suddenly, bring up a subject that might be a law, right? In the faith, it's revealed in the Kitab Ahdas, right? And you suddenly bring it up, and say, and I've seen this in firesides and I've seen this in gatherings, and suddenly you say a situation and the teacher of the cause is going through the principles of progressive revelation and the love of Baha'u'llah and how his life is almost a direct mirror to the lives of all the other manifestations, coming with sorrows and sufferings and sacrifice. And then suddenly some Baha'i raises his hand. Oh, did you know that in the Baha'i faith, there's no drinking? Or something like that. And I've seen this happen. And then suddenly the seeker is like, what? No drinking? I was just going to go to a party. And suddenly the whole discourse shifts, right? And so, yeah, it is true. As a Baha'is, there is alcohol is forbidden as a Baha'i. But there is a time and place, and that's why the beloved guardian here is saying, let him refrain at the outset from insisting on such laws and observances as might impose too severe a strain on the seeker's newly awakened faith. Because what would that do? Remember, we're trying to kindle their flame of fire within them, okay? So that it becomes a fire. If suddenly you impose something that might be too, much, you're literally hampering that fire and quelling it, and that fire is gone. So they're very fragile at that stage. And so this is what the beloved guardian says, and endeavor to nurse him patiently, tactfully. What does tactfully mean? It means use words that do not hurt the other person. Be careful with your words. Think before you speak. Tactful, and yet determinedly into full maturity, and aid him proclaim his unqualified acceptance of whatever has been ordained by Baha'u'llah. So the beloved guardian is saying, it's not like you just open your mouth and then you teach and then you let them go. No. The responsibility on the teacher is till they attain full maturity, okay? And what? They reach a stage, okay? This is from the beloved guardian. He says, let him, as soon as that stage has been attained, introduce him into the body of his fellow believers. So you're still not through with them, as a teacher. The beloved guardian says, even though now you've introduced them into the body of believers, and seek through constant fellowship and active participation in the local activities of the community, you enable him to contribute his share to the enrichment of his life, the furtherance of his tasks, the consolidation of his interests, the coordination of his activities with those of his sister communities. Let him not be content So you can't be content until he has infused into his spiritual child so deep a longing as to impel him to arise independently in his turn and devote his energies to the quickening of other souls and upholding of its laws and principles laid down by his newly adopted faith. So if you undertake to teach the cause, you are literally saying, I am now a spiritual mother. You want to have a spiritual child. So you cannot let go of your spiritual child till it reaches maturity. That spiritual child is your responsibility. So you have to nurture it. And that is an undertaking that you have to nurture. And here the beloved guardian is talking about all the stages of nurturing it. And the final stage is that the spiritual child has reached a level of maturity, that it is now impelled to arise independently in its turn and devote his energies to the quickening of other souls. Now, that spiritual child is spiritual adult, and it's now going to be a teacher for himself or herself. You see? So this is from the beloved guardian, paragraph 78. Okay? Sorry, I'm dissecting this down, but we'll also go through the paragraphs coming up. But I'm trying to break it down here also. So paragraph 79. Now, let every participator in this continent-wide campaign. Isn't this such cool language? This continent-wide campaign. And this is because this is the first 7-year plan initiated by the American believers, and particularly those engaged in the pioneer work in virgin territories. Bear in mind the necessity of keeping in close and constant contact with those responsible agencies designed to direct, coordinate, and facilitate the teaching activities of the entire community. So here, paragraph 79 is, if you are planning to go pioneering, you got to stay in touch with the agencies that are coordinating these activities. You can't go off and suddenly, go quiet. I'm teaching in, the Tonga, and I've been there for so long, and it's going great. But, if you're not in communication with the agencies, such as the local spiritual assembly, the national representatives, the chief auxiliary institution, the national teaching committee, or this assemblies and all of these agencies, who knows what you're doing, what's going on? You got to have this constant flow of information. The guidance should be also coming to you. So this is what the beloved guardian says. They who labor for the spread of the cause of Baha'u'llah should, through constant interchange of ideas, through letters, circulars, reports, bulletins, and other means of communication with those established instruments designed for the propagation of the faith, ensure the smooth and speedy functioning of the teaching machinery of their administrative order. So it's this interchange of ideas, information, learnings. I mean, look at all the learnings that are happening in this cluster-wide, campaign of teaching that's happening all across the world. Ideas are happening all over the world, and all those learnings are going all the way to the International Teaching Center, and the International Teaching Center is sending all those information and reports and bulletins and guidance to the counselors, to the national spiritual assemblies all around the world, and those are being spread to all different pioneering spots. And so those are information and learnings are happening, and then that knowledge goes back to the top. It keeps going, and so this information is constantly going back and forth. So this flowing. And so then the beloved guardian says, confusion, delay, duplication of efforts, dissipation of energy will thereby be completely avoided. So imagine if you're sitting in, one of these spots and you're like, I don't know what to do. No, I have no information. I'm confused. This would be completely avoided if you stay in constant communication with these agencies. Delays would be constantly eliminated. Duplication of efforts, because you know exactly what your role is, what your assigned purpose is. There will be no duplication of efforts, and all energies will thereby be focused. There will not be dissipation of energy. It will not be wasted energy. Okay? And then he says, the mighty flood of grace of Baha'u'llah flowing abundantly and without the least obstruction through these essential channels will so inundate the hearts and souls of men as to enable to bring forth the harvest repeatedly predicted by Abdul-Baha. And our last paragraph. Wow, isn't this so much information? Just think about it. Paragraph 74 to 80, the Guardian is just hitting it home, right? What is practically needed for teaching? Then paragraph 80, upon every participator in this concerted effort. Now, when you get time, I want you, as a side work, Google effort in the writings of the Guardian. You'll see, and almost every time, and I think 4 different times the word effort comes up, but in the Advent to Divine Justice. But what I'm saying is they all have prefix words attached to them. Okay, and these prefix, these descriptive types of effort. So one is concerted effort. One other one is tremendous effort, and that's when we were talking about make a tremendous effort in the start, talking about the in addressing to racial prejudice. Make a tremendous effort. Okay, and so this type of effort is they're all different types of effort, and all of them are make a huge amount of effort, and so I think another one, I have another one. There was another one. I think it was paragraph 60. I'll pull it up. And then in paragraph 58, this is the great, it says, let the white make a supreme effort. So there's another type of effort. So every one of these efforts, so there's supreme effort, concerted effort, tremendous effort, and concerted effort, right? So there's different types of effort here. All of them in the sense of descriptors that Beloved Guardians wants to address this. How important is this effort that we have to undertake? Unprecedented in the annals of the American Baha'i community rests the spiritual obligation to make of the mandate of teaching, so vitally binding upon all, the all-pervading concern of his life, in his daily activities and contacts, in all his journeys, whether for business or otherwise, on his holidays and outings, and on any mission he may be called upon to undertake. Every bearer of the message of Baha'u'llah should consider it not only an obligation, but a privilege to scatter far and wide the seeds of his faith and to rest content in the abiding knowledge that whatever be the immediate response to that message, and however inadequate the vehicle that conveyed it, the power of its author will, as he sees fit, enable those seeds to germinate, and in circumstances which no one can foresee, enrich the harvest which the labor of his followers will gather. And if he be a member of any spiritual assembly, let him encourage his assembly to consecrate a certain amount of its time at each of its sessions to the earnest and prayerful consideration of such ways and means as may foster the campaign of teaching or may furnish whatever resources are available for its progress, extension, and consolidation. Very powerful and important paragraph. Every American Baha'i here, this is direct at the American Baha'i community. Granted, yeah, sure, this is written to the North American Baha'i community, United States and Canada. But here, the Beloved Guardian is directly addressing America here, okay? And the American Baha'i community rests the spiritual obligation to make of the mandate of teaching so vitally binding upon all, this all-pervading concern of our life. He hits it home. He doesn't, quibble with words. What does he say? He says in his daily activities and contacts, in all his journeys, whether business or holidays, outings, whether work or pleasure, really. He's saying it doesn't matter. He's saying, and on any mission he be called upon to undertake, every bearer of the message of Baha'u'llah should consider it not only an obligation, but a privilege. It's a duty to teach. It's right there in Kitab al-Ahdas. You can't go wrong. It's right there, Kitab al-Ahdas. It's a fundamental duty to teach the cause of Baha'u'llah. But Baha'u'llah, in the Beloved Guardian, says, yeah, sure, it's a duty to teach the cause, but it's also a privilege. It's a gift of God. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to scatter far and wide the seeds of his faith, and to rest content in the abiding knowledge that whatever be the immediate response to that message, and however inadequate the vehicle that conveyed it, God knows you, I, and everyone that's ever listening to this are inadequate. We're not great vehicles for the promotion of his word. And the thing is here, we have to rest upon the power of its author's will. We have to have faith in him. Put all our energy, that trust in him. We have to have trust in him. And so that those seeds will germinate. And the circumstances which no one can foresee enrich this harvest, which the labor of his followers will gather. Then the very last line, very important, and can be easily missed in this Advent to Divine Justice of 124 paragraphs and 77 pages. This very last line, very important. He says, if you be a member of a spiritual assembly, which I happen to be, in my little city, if you be a member of a local spiritual assembly, and it could be, and he says spiritual assembly, it doesn't mean, it could be national spiritual assembly, right? It says spiritual assembly. Let him encourage his assembly to consecrate a certain part of its time. So focus a part of your session. It's called chamber time. That's what the term is. A certain part of your chamber time to what? The earnest and prayerful consideration of such ways and means as may foster the campaign of teaching. Do we do that every session? You right? Or we got so much administrative business that, this person's having marriage issues and this person's having this problem, and we don't have enough funds for this, or, we have to go through the calendar. There's a feast coming up. Who's going to get the food? Who's going to do the tea? This or that, what events is coming up. And, and then by the time, assembly's over, we're like, oh my God, what time is it? The hour is getting late. Time to be over. I've served on a lot of assemblies. But then the reality is, we got to be real. The Beloved Guardian, it says at the end of here, it says, let him dedicate a certain part of every meeting to the earnest and prayerful consideration of such ways and means as may foster the campaign of teaching. So first of all, you got to have a plan of teaching. So you can't just okay, we're going to listen to the Beloved Guardian, end of paragraph 80. The Guardian says what the assembly has to do, right? We're going to spend earnest and prayerful consideration on such ways and means as may foster the campaign of teaching. Okay, but what is that about? You got to have a plan of teaching. So the spiritual assembly's role is also to have a plan of teaching that is under the whole orchestra, the whole cohesion, to be cohesive with the plan that is being unfurled by the Universal House of Justice. It should be cohesive. And working under the constructs of your cluster. The cluster has a plan too. So it should all be cohesive. So, and in concert, the spiritual assembly should have a plan of teaching. So then every single spiritual assembly meeting should have the part of their agenda, part of their meeting should be for that. And may furnish whatever resources. So this is not just consult on it, right? But The second part is, may furnish whatever resources are available. What is that talking about? It's about money. It's about personnel. People are resources. So, it's about not only to use the resources of the community for teaching, allocating people to assist the teaching work. Use whatever resources are available for its progress, extension, and consolidation. Here, the beloved guardian is saying, what is more important than teaching? What is more important? And then he's saying the spiritual assembly should focus on this in every single meeting. I can assure you, many assemblies lose focus on this, and just because of the work of the faith. And so here, the beloved guardian categorically wants the focus to go back to teaching. So there we go. That was a much longer recap than I intended, but I thought it was good and it was helpful to do. And then lastly, this last part in paragraph 80, if he attends a summer school, which kind of like this is a summer school, but it's a weekly session facilitated by the Clearwater Baha'i community. If he attends his summer school and everyone without exception is urged to take advantage of attending it, let him consider such an occasion as a welcome and precious opportunity to do what? Enrich through lectures, study, and discussion his knowledge of the fundamentals of his faith, as to be able to transmit with greater confidence and effectiveness the message that has been entrusted to his care. So this is really now defining what these summer school sessions should do. These summer schools should have lectures, study, discussion, deep study of the faith, knowledge, fundamentals of the faith, so that the listeners will be able to transmit greater confidence and effectiveness, the message that have been entrusted to you. So you now, just like remember when we talked about in earlier paragraph, talking about right here, that you are the spiritual mother and you want to create a spiritual child. And that spiritual child is what you want to teach, your spiritual child. You're the spiritual mother and you're going to have a child and you want to teach that spiritual child, right? And through that teaching, it takes a concerted effort, takes a lot of tremendous effort, right? But the eventual final product that we talked about was that child will independently, in his turn, devote his energies to the quickening of other souls, right? Then, why did I bring that up? Because these summer school sessions, also, these sessions should be able to transmit with greater confidence and effectiveness the message that has been entrusted to your care. So that these sessions should be able to create that the listener should become a teacher of the cause of God. You follow? So that you become, per se, the teacher. You become so well-versed, so knowledgeable, that you will be able to, if we're studying the Advent of Divine Justice, you should be able to give a course on the Advent of Divine Justice. Or if we're studying the Dawn Breakers, after a study through a summer school, you should be able to, give a course on the Dawn Breakers. So this should be the level of study, not very sitting in the back, very passively with your arms folded and just a few head nods here and there, just, barely staying awake. You should be so into it, as they say, that you should be able to absorb it internally, right? So this is here the beloved guardian. Let him, moreover, seek whenever feasible through inter-community visits to stimulate the zeal for teaching. I was like, wow, here the beloved guardian is talking about home visits, 1938, right? 1938 home visits. What is he saying? Through inter-community visits to stimulate the zeal for teaching. Where does home visits come? Book 2, right? Book 2 is arising to teach. So arising to serve, right? Book 2, that's really talking about book 2. Then book 6 is, the book on teaching, right? Teaching the cause. So really book 2 is talking about creating that fire within the heart to serve the cause. And that comes through inter-community visits to stimulate the zeal for teaching. Home visits, the beloved guardians addressing it right here, okay? And to demonstrate to outsiders the zest and alertness of the promoters of the cause and the organic unity of its institutions. So there we are. There we are. That was quite a in-depth analysis. We're getting, I'll read the introduction and the key points, and then we'll close it off for today. So here we go. In these paragraphs, the beloved guardian provides principles for conducting the teaching campaigns that had started in North America as part of the first 7-year plan. The guidance provided by the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi describes both the preparation as well as the effective execution of the teaching plans. These are the major key points. I know we really went through every paragraph pretty detailed, but we're going to also study it much more coming up. A teaching campaign should be planned, have clear objectives, and be carried out systematically. And those preparing for a teaching campaign should initially study the history, the teachings, and administration of the faith, and be aware of all events associated with it. And that's coming from paragraph 75. They should learn the language and culture of the region where they are planning to pioneer and teach. This is before they go to that area. That's paragraph 76. And everyone should use his or her initiative to find the most efficient approach for the proposed teaching campaign. They should not wait for instructions from the administrative order. The believer who wishes to pioneer should not be deterred by lack of experience or resources, the opposition of family and friends, or by the volatility of world events. And when a teacher places his whole trust in God and is adorned with virtues, kindled with the love of Baha'u'llah, and detached, his words will influence others. The teacher should be unrestrained as the wind. Teacher of the faith should consider the degree of his hearers' receptivity and decide for himself the suitability of either the direct or indirect method of teaching. We're going to talk about all of these more in depth. The obligation to teach should be the all-pervading concern of the lives of those who participate in teaching campaigns. So there we are, dear friends. We're maybe 10 minutes early-ish before we usually close, but I'm going to stop there because that was a lot. And I want to, any questions at this time before we end it there?
A lot to think about.
Sure, right?
Long list of things to do.
Exactly.
Couldn't help but think of Ella Bailey when we talked about the guardian, even before Ella Bailey was saying, don't let friends and relatives inadvertently get in your way. And if you have a feeling that you want to go out in the teaching world.
Yeah,
that was pretty neat.
Yeah, the story of Ella Bailey moved me so much. My first daughter, my eldest daughter, is named Ella, and she was born in Houston, and so that's where I live.
Oh yeah, very good.
So and she was an incredible lady, and I encourage everyone to. There's a wonderful YouTube video on the story and life of Ella Bailey, and she, at the elderly age, pioneered to Tripoli, and that is where she passed. And she wanted to teach the cause and go there, and she fell down even before she opened her mouth and not a single soul heard of the faith, went in Tripoli from her.
Yeah.
But it was such an incredible dedication and sacrifice. And her story is so incredible that she was crowned with martyrdom. She was considered a martyr. And the very interesting about one last thing on Ella Bailey was that when the call for funds came, and it came when the Mashal Asghar, the Mother Temple of the West, was being built, and so there was calls for funds constantly, and so Ella Bailey, she was such an incredible soul, and so she didn't have much. She was a teacher. Teachers generally have never made much. The reality is, and also even at that time when she was being a teacher, she didn't make much. And so the reality is, every time the call for the funds came, she would quickly sell whatever she had and put it in a purse and send it. And this happened several times. And then one of the times that the call for the funds came, and it was almost very near the last call. So she had already sold most of her stuff. So the first time the call came, she sold a good half of her livelihood. And she was like, oh, it's okay. I was saving that to have a nice, funeral, but I'm a small woman. I don't need to have a nice funeral, because she was at the end of her life. She said, I don't need to have a big funeral. I could have a smaller coffin, whatever, right? So she did, the next call came, and so she sold even half of what she had now. So it was literally, she only had a quarter. And she determined that she had to have a smaller coffin. She was like, I am a very small woman. I can crouch my legs up when I pass, I'm in my coffin, and I don't need to have a very large coffin. I could crouch my legs up, but the house of worship needs it. The call has come from the beloved guardian for a call for funds for the Mother Temple of the West. And in the end, when the last call came, she was like, what do I need of money? I am a small woman. What do I need? So she sent everything she had for the erection of the temple. It's an incredible lady. I encourage you guys to read her story, Ella Bailey. And this sacrifice that she gave, the beloved guardian, when she passed away in Tripoli, out of the pocket of the beloved guardian himself, he sent his own money for the erection of her resting place, because she didn't even have a penny for a resting place herself. And it was he was so moved by her sacrifice, and it's incredible. So you mentioned her, I was very moved because, and also she was born in my city, Houston. So I was like, and got the crown of martyrdom. So there you are. Excellent. Anything else? Thank you so much. So there we are. We finished paragraphs 63 through 73, and we did a somewhat in-depth study of paragraphs 74 through 80. But next time, we'll really go into them into much more detail. Paragraph 74 through 80, that's your homework for this coming week. So get your Advent to Divine Justice and read paragraph 74 through 80. And thank you so much. And we'll go. I hand it off to dear John. Thank you.
So before we say the closing prayer, just to remind everyone, session 30 will be next week, and it will be on February 20th, Sunday, February 20th at 3 p.m. And if you have any concerns or questions, please feel free to reach out, and we would love to address them. If we could please have for the closing prayer, either Mr. Kinsman, Scott, I see you're unmuted already. If you don't mind, would you be able to say this prayer?
Sure.
Thank you, Scott.
Oh my God, Thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all peoples, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear John. Thank you, dear Jeremiah. Thank you, every one of you.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful week.
You too.